A white billionaire finds a homeless black boy dancing with her paralyzed daughter. The barefoot boy slipped through the fence, saw the little girl sitting alone with tears streaming down her face, and did something no one expected. He began to dance, not for money, not for food, but simply to make her smile. What happened next would change all of their lives forever. Catherine Ashford was one of the wealthiest women in Atlanta. Her tech empire spanned hospital software, data management, and healthcare innovation, earning her the title of the Golden Mind, because everything she touched turned to success. Yet behind the high walls of her Buckhead estate, her greatest struggle was not business. It was the silence of a daughter whose laughter she longed to hear again. Her only daughter, Emma, once a bright, lively 10-year-old, had been left paralyzed after the tragic car accident that also claimed the life of her beloved father, Michael. Once her laughter rang through the house, like music. Once she danced ballet in the garden, twirling under the magnolia trees. But now she sat quietly in her wheelchair, staring out the window, her spirit dimmed. If stories like this are what you came here for, subscribe so we can keep bringing them to you. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know. Now let's continue. Catherine Ashford had built her empire from scratch. She wasn't born into wealth. Her father was a mechanic, her mother a schoolteacher. She worked her way through Georgia Tech on scholarships, surviving on ramen and coffee, coding late into the night in the computer lab. By 28, she developed software that revolutionized how hospitals tracked patient care. By 35, she was a millionaire. By 40, a billionaire. She married Michael Ashford, a kind man who taught history at Emory University and never cared about her money. He loved her for her laugh, for the way she talked with her hands when she was excited, for how she still remembered what it felt like to struggle. Together, they had Emma, a beautiful girl with her father's gentle eyes and her mother's fierce determination. Emma loved ballet. She loved books. She loved asking questions that made adults pause and think. She was everything bright and good in Catherine's carefully built world. Then came that Tuesday in June. The accident on I-85. A semi-truck driver nodded off at the wheel. Michael was killed instantly. Emma survived, but the doctors said she would never walk again. In one moment, everything Catherine had built, not the money, but the life, the love, the future, shattered like glass. At first, Catherine tried to fight it with everything she had. She flew Emma to Shepherd Center in Atlanta, the best spinal injury facility in the country. Nothing. She took her to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore for experimental treatments. Nothing. She found a renowned German specialist who promised breakthrough therapies. Nothing. Each attempt ended in the same crushing disappointment. But it wasn't just Emma's legs that were broken. It was her spirit. Emma stopped talking. Her voice, once constant with questions and stories, fell silent. She stopped eating. Catherine would bring her favorite foods and Emma would just stare at the plate. She stopped wanting anything. Physical therapy sessions became battles where Emma refused to participate, tears streaming down her face as she shook her head over and over. The therapist tried everything. Encouragement, gentle pushing, rewards. Nothing reached her. Emma had retreated somewhere deep inside herself, somewhere Catherine couldn't follow no matter how hard she tried. At night, Catherine would sit in Emma's room, watching her daughter sleep. She'd hold Emma's small hand and whisper promises she didn't know how to keep. "We'll get through this, baby. I promise. We'll find a way." But as the months passed, Catherine felt hope slipping away like water through her fingers. The mansion, once filled with Emma's laughter and Michael's terrible jokes and the sound of music from every room, became a tomb. Beautiful but hollow. Catherine would walk the long hallways at night, her footsteps echoing on marble floors, and feel the silence pressing against her chest. She had everything money could buy. The best doctors. The finest equipment. A mansion that people photographed for magazines. But she couldn't buy back her daughter's smile. She couldn't purchase hope. She couldn't write a check big enough to make Emma want to live again. That's when Catherine learned the hardest lesson of her life. There are some things wealth cannot touch. Some kinds of brokenness that money cannot heal. Some doors that privilege cannot open. Her daughter was slipping away, and Catherine, who had built an empire by solving impossible problems, had no solution. No algorithm. No strategy. Just helpless, desperate love and the crushing weight of her own powerlessness. The mansion sat surrounded by perfectly manicured lawns, security gates, and walls designed to keep the world out. but they also kept Emma trapped inside. Isolated. Alone. Dying slowly in a beautiful cage. Catherine didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. Not because of anything she did. Not because of her wealth or connections or determination. But because of a thin black boy in torn clothes who would slip through a broken fence and bring the one thing money couldn't buy. His name was Jaden, but everyone called him JJ. He was 12 years old and had been on his own for 2 years, ever since his grandmother died and the foster system couldn't find a place for him. The group homes were full. The families who might have taken him wanted younger children, easier children, children who didn't come with the weight of loss already carved into their faces. JJ lived the way invisible people do. He slept in abandoned buildings near the MARTA station, their broken windows letting in the cold. Under the I-75 overpass when it rained, the sound of cars overhead was like distant thunder. Sometimes in the doorways of closed shops, curled up small, hoping no one would notice him before dawn. He ate what he could find, leftover food from dumpsters behind restaurants on Peachtree Street, donated meals from shelters when he could get there before they closed, and turned people away. Most people looked right through him. A black boy in dirty clothes was just part of the landscape in Atlanta, something to step around, to avoid, to pretend you didn't see. Women clutched their purses tighter when he walked past. Men looked away. Shop owners shooed him from their doorways like he was a stray dog. But JJ refused to disappear completely. When hunger made his stomach hurt and loneliness made his chest ache, he danced. He'd taught himself by watching street performers downtown, copying their moves in the shadows until he got them right. He'd spin and moonwalk and make exaggerated faces that sometimes made people smile. Sometimes they'd toss him $1. Sometimes they'd tell him to move along. But for those few minutes, he existed. He mattered. He was real. That's what he was doing the day he found the broken fence behind the mansion, just looking for bottles to return for change, maybe some discarded food. He wasn't planning to go inside. But then he saw her through the hedges. A girl sitting alone, tears on her face, and he recognized that look because he'd worn it himself. Emma sat perfectly still in her wheelchair on the back terrace, her face turned toward the pool where she used to swim. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She just let them fall, one after another, like she'd forgotten how to do anything else. The summer air was thick and warm, but Emma felt cold inside, so cold she wondered if she'd ever feel warm again. JJ saw her through the gap in the hedge. He recognized that emptiness in her face. He'd felt it himself after his grandmother died. That hollow feeling that makes you wonder why you're still here, why you bother waking up at all. He didn't think so. He just moved. He slipped through the hedge and stepped onto the perfect lawn where she could see him. And then he started to dance. Not smooth or professional like the performers downtown. Wild and silly and ridiculous. He did the robot with exaggerated jerky movements, his arms popping at angles that made no sense. He pretended to walk against an invisible wind, leaning forward dramatically, his feet sliding backward. He crossed his eyes and stuck out his tongue. He spun in a circle and nearly fell, catching himself at the last second with a dramatic flourish and a deep bow. Emma blinked. Her tears stopped for just a second. Then the corners of her mouth lifted. Just a little. Then more. And then she laughed. A real laugh, surprised and genuine, that burst out of her like something that had been trapped too long. It echoed across the perfect lawn and carried through the open windows where Catherine was trying to focus on a conference call. Catherine dropped her phone. The voice on the other end kept talking, but she wasn't listening anymore. She ran to the window and stopped dead, her hand flying to her mouth. Her daughter, her silent, broken daughter who hadn't made a sound in weeks, was laughing. And the reason was a thin black boy in torn clothes dancing barefoot on her property. Catherine's first instinct was fear. Who was he? How did he get past security? Was Emma safe? Her hand reached for her phone to call Thomas, the head of security. But then Emma clapped her hands together, her face bright and alive in a way Catherine hadn't seen since before the accident. The way it used to be when Michael would tell his terrible dad jokes at dinner, when Emma would dance in the garden, when their house was full of light instead of this terrible silence. Catherine stood frozen, her heart pounding, her finger hovering over Thomas's number, watching this impossible moment and knowing it would force her to choose. Catherine didn't call security. She stood at the window, hand pressed against the glass, and watched. Watching this stranger make her daughter smile. I watched Emma's face come alive. Watched something she'd thought was lost forever suddenly, impossibly, return. JJ danced for 10 minutes before he noticed the woman standing in the window. He froze mid-spin, his body going rigid. He knew that look adults got when they saw him where he wasn't supposed to be. He'd seen it 1,000 times before, right before they yelled, before they called the police, before they chased him away like he was nothing. He tensed, ready to run. But she didn't yell. She just stood there, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. And then, slowly, she walked outside. JJ's heart hammered in his chest. The back door opened, and the woman stepped onto the terrace. She was tall, dressed in expensive clothes that probably cost more than he'd seen in his entire life. Her face was careful, controlled, like she was trying to figure out a problem. "What's your name?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, measured. "JJ, ma'am." His voice came out smaller than he wanted. "Why did you come here, JJ?" There was no anger in her tone, but no warmth either. Just a question that needed an answer. He looked at Emma, then back at Catherine. The truth tumbled out before he could stop it. "I saw her crying. I wanted to make her stop. I wasn't going to take anything, I promise. I just wanted to help." Silence stretched between them. Catherine studied him. This thin boy with torn clothes and bare feet, who'd somehow slipped through her security to dance for her daughter. She should send him away. Call the police. Make sure he never comes back. That's what anyone would do. That's what made sense. But then Emma spoke for the first time in weeks. Her voice was small but clear, cutting through Catherine's thoughts like a bell. "Mama, don't send him away. Please." Catherine looked at her daughter's face, truly looked at it, and saw something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Real, fragile, precious hope shining in Emma's eyes for the first time since the accident. Catherine's chest tightened. Every instinct told her to be careful, to protect Emma, to not let a stranger into their lives. But standing there, seeing her daughter's face alive again, she felt something shift inside her. "Can you come back tomorrow?" The words came out before she'd fully decided to say them. "At 4 o'clock. Can you do that?" JJ's eyes went wide, disbelief washing over his face. "Yes, ma'am. I can do that. I promise. 4 o'clock. That night, Catherine couldn't sleep. She walked through her mansion, her bare feet silent on cool marble, thinking about what she'd done. About the thin black boy who'd somehow reached her daughter when the best doctors in the world had failed. About what her mother-in-law Patricia would say. What her board members would think. What the neighbors would whisper behind perfectly manicured hedges. She stood in Emma's doorway, watching her daughter sleep peacefully for the first time in months. Emma's face was relaxed, her breathing steady. No tears. No nightmares. Just sleep. And Catherine knew, whatever this cost her, whatever judgment came, whatever doors closed because of this choice, it was worth it. Her daughter was worth it. Chapter 5, When Worlds Collide. JJ came back at 4 o'clock the next day. And the day after that. And the day after that. Each time, he slipped through the hedge at exactly 4, his bare feet silent on the grass. Each time, he danced. Each time, Emma laughed. And each time, something small but profound changed. Emma started clapping stronger, her hands meeting with real force instead of that weak, listless motion from before. She began moving her arms to copy his movements, lifting them higher each day. She tried to spin her wheelchair in circles, giggling when she got dizzy. Her voice grew louder, calling out, "Do that one again, and watch this, JJ." The girl who'd wanted to die was learning to want something again. To live again. Catherine watched it all, her heart swelling and breaking at the same time. Because she knew the cost was coming. She could feel it building like storm clouds on the horizon. It started with Thomas, her head of security. He cornered her one afternoon in the hallway, his face tight with concern. "Mrs. Ashford, we need to talk about the boy. We don't know anything about him. Where he's from, who his people are. What if he's dangerous? What if something happens? He's 12 years old, and he's making my daughter smile," Catherine said, her voice firm. "But ma'am," Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "What will people think?" "I don't care what people think." But she did care. And people were starting to talk. Her mother-in-law Patricia arrived unannounced 3 days later, letting herself in with the key Michael had given her years ago. She found JJ in the garden with Emma, teaching her a simple dance move she could do from her wheelchair. Patricia's face went pale, then red. "Catherine," her voice could have cut glass. "What on earth is that boy doing here?" The words landed exactly as Patricia intended them, sharp with more than just surprise. The emphasis on that boy said everything she didn't say out loud. He's Emma's friend, Catherine said evenly. A homeless child? A black homeless child? In our garden. Patricia's hand flew to her pearl necklace like she needed something to hold on to. What would Michael think? Something snapped inside Catherine. Heat rushed through her chest, up her neck, into her face. Michael would think our daughter is laughing again. That's exactly what he'd think. He'd see Emma's face and know this boy gave her back something we thought was gone forever. Patricia's mouth opened, then closed. She gathered her purse and left without another word. She hasn't spoken to Catherine since. Then came the call from David, her business partner. Kat, I'm hearing things. About some street kid hanging around your place. People are concerned. You need to be careful here. Think about optics. Think about liability. Think about your image and what this could mean for the company. I am thinking, Catherine said, her voice deadly quiet. I'm thinking about my daughter. But the real test came when Emma's physical therapist arrived for their weekly session. Emma, energized by JJ's daily visits, actually wanted to try. For the first time since the accident, she looked at the parallel bars and said, I want to try standing. The therapist's eyebrows shot up. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. With tremendous effort, Emma gripped the arms of her wheelchair. Her face tightened with concentration, her teeth clenched. JJ knelt beside her, not helping, not touching, just being there. You got this, he whispered. You got this, Emma. I know you do. Emma pushed. Her arms shook like leaves in a storm. Her legs trembled. Sweat beaded on her forehead. And then, impossibly, miraculously, she rose. 1 inch. 2 inches. 3. She stood, swaying, her whole body trembling with the effort, for 3 full seconds before her strength gave out, and she sank back down. The therapist stared in shock. Catherine's hand covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. And JJ jumped up, shouting at the top of his lungs, You did it! You stood up! Emma, you did it! Emma was crying and laughing at the same time, her face radiant. I did it. Did you see, Mama? I stood up. I really stood up. That night, after Emma had gone to bed still talking excitedly about standing, Catherine found JJ sitting on the back steps. The summer evening was warm, crickets singing in the garden. He was picking at a loose thread on his torn shirt, looking small and alone in the gathering darkness. Tell me about yourself, JJ, Catherine said, sitting down beside him. Really tell me. He was quiet for a long moment. Then the words came slowly, carefully, like he wasn't used to anyone asking. He told her about his grandmother, Nana Jean, who raised him when his mother couldn't, who made him breakfast every morning even when there wasn't much food, who taught him that dancing was a way to hold on to joy when everything else was hard, about how she died of cancer 2 years ago, how he'd sat beside her bed holding her hand until the end, about foster homes that didn't work out, too many kids, not enough patience, people who looked at him and saw a problem instead of a child, about sleeping under bridges and dancing for spare change to survive, about feeling invisible most days, like he didn't matter to anyone, like he could disappear and the world wouldn't even notice. Catherine felt shame wash over her like a wave. How many times had she driven past boys like JJ? How many times had she looked away, uncomfortable, pretending not to see? She'd never thought about where they slept, or what they ate, or what it felt like to be 12 years old and completely alone in the world. She'd built walls to keep her world safe and perfect, and those same walls had let her ignore the suffering right outside them. I'm sorry, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. I'm sorry the world failed you. You didn't fail me, JJ said, looking up at her with eyes that had seen too much for 12 years. You let me come back. Catherine took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding, but her mind was clear. JJ, how would you feel about staying here? Not just visiting. Living here. This would be your home. JJ stared at her like she'd spoken a language he didn't understand. You mean it? I mean it. You gave my daughter hope when I thought hope was gone. You deserve more than hope. You deserve a home. You deserve to belong somewhere. You deserve to matter. But, JJ's voice dropped to a whisper. People are gonna talk. I know how it is. I've seen how they look at me. Let them talk, Catherine said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. You're part of this family now. The news spread through Catherine's circle like wildfire. Her phone exploded with calls, some supportive, most not. Patricia stopped speaking to her entirely. Two board members, Richard and James, suggested in a carefully worded email that she should step back from public responsibilities until this situation settles down. Translation: until she came to her senses and sent the boy away. A local reporter somehow got the story and wrote a piece that went viral within hours. The comments section became a battlefield. Some praised Catherine's compassion. Others accused her of being a white savior, using a black child for good publicity and tax breaks. Conservative voices called it reckless and dangerous. Progressive voices debated whether it was appropriate or whether she was perpetuating harmful dynamics. Everyone had an opinion about what Catherine should do with her life, her daughter, her home. Catherine read none of it. She was too busy watching Emma take her first real steps with JJ cheering beside her. Too busy making sure JJ had clothes that fit and food that filled him and a bed that was his own. Too busy enrolling him in the private school Emma would attend in the fall. Too busy learning what actually mattered. One evening a few weeks later, she stood in the garden watching JJ teach Emma a new dance move. Something simple she could do from her wheelchair, just moving her arms in rhythm. The setting sun painted everything gold and amber. Their laughter filled the air like music. And Catherine understood something profound that shifted everything she thought she knew about power and wealth. For years, she'd believed her money made her powerful. Her success, her mansion, her name on buildings and in business magazines. But real power wasn't money or status or what people thought of you. Real power was choosing love when fear was easier. Choosing connection when judgment was certain. Choosing to see someone's humanity when society said they were invisible and didn't matter. She'd lost some relationships. Patricia, two board members, several friends from the country club who stopped returning her calls. But she'd gained something far more valuable. A daughter who wanted to live again. A boy who finally belonged somewhere. And the understanding that the truest wealth had never been in her bank account or her stock portfolio or her real estate holdings. It was here, at this moment. In this family she'd chosen to build across every line society said shouldn't be crossed. Emma looked up from her wheelchair and called out, her voice full of joy. "Mama, come dance with us." Catherine walked across the lawn, kicked off her expensive shoes, and joined them. JJ took one of her hands. Emma took the other, and they moved together in the golden light. Three people who'd found each other across impossible distances and decided that love mattered more than fear. And for the first time since the accident, Catherine's house wasn't just a mansion filled with expensive things and empty rooms. It was home. Thank you for staying with Catherine, Emma, and JJ until the end. If their story reminded you that love is stronger than fear and connection matters more than comfort, let us know in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Hit that subscribe button for more emotional, powerful, real-life stories. Until next time, be kind, be brave, and keep watching.